Hello and welcome to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, the ultimate show for romance book lovers looking for the best books worth reading. I'm your host, Leslie Murphy, and in each short episode, I share my favorite book list of recommendations so you know exactly what to add to your must-read list. Join me as I explore the romance genre and have fun collecting book boyfriends along the way, because life is better with a love story. All right. Hello, readers. Welcome back to the She Reads Romance Book podcast. So excited to have my guest on today, who is definitely going to get us in the mood for summer with her upcoming new romance book release, One Last Summer, that comes out June 11th. We're going to talk all about that book and how we're going to get excited for summer romance. So welcome, Kate Spencer.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to just spend some time talking about my favorite topic.
Yes. And does it feel weird being like on the opposite side of a podcast? You know?
A little bit. I'm very used to guiding a conversation. So sometimes I have to remember I can relax, I guess is what I'm saying. So
we're going to be very chill and talk
I love
about
that.
Your book. Yes, absolutely. Well, I read the book.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And I loved it. Absolutely. But for readers, listeners who haven't, and they will after this, click and pre-order it, tell us a little book summary about One Last Summer.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for reading it. It means so much to me as an author, and you're always in a little cocoon for so long as you're writing, and it almost feels surreal when other people actually get a hold of your book. And so that is a real thrill. So I just want to say thank you, and thank you to anybody listening who also picks it up. One Last Summer follows the story of a woman named Clara whose life is spiraling out of control, despite the fact that she has tried everything in her power to control it and be on top of it. She is reeling from an ex moving on very quickly. Her job, which she has really been a striver at for many years, is starting to crumble, and her boss essentially forces her to take time off. And what she ends up doing is heading back up to her childhood summer camp, where her friends gather every year as a little mini reunion, and she's always skipped it for other obligations. And this year she goes to get an escape from the rest of her life. And when she gets there, she realizes that a lot has changed in the time that she has been absent. She sees how friendships have moved on without her, and the ways in which she has let those friendships lapse. The owners are retiring, and spoiler alert, they're selling the camp. And her old childhood crush, old flame / frenemy, Mac, is there, and he has been working at the camp for his whole adult life. And they, of course, immediately pick up where they left off. And it's a very fiery and passionate second chance romance that kind of leaves her feeling like, what am I doing with my life? And I don't know if any of us can ever really answer that question, but it's definitely something that she explores. What does she really want versus what has she always told herself she's supposed to want?
Yes, absolutely. Well, my first thought after, and I'm like, oh, Kate's coming on, I'm so excited to talk to her about it, was, did you go to summer camp as a kid?
I did actually go to summer camp. I attended a week-long horseback riding sleepaway camp when I was in elementary school. And then when I got older, I attended a month-long and 8-week-long summer camp in New Hampshire, which was an incredible gift. It really allowed me to explore an authentic side of myself that I don't know if I'd ever really truly tapped into in my life back at home.
Yeah. Well, reading this, I mean, I loved so much about it, but the whole camp piece, I was like, man, I missed out. I didn't go to sleepaway camp as a kid, and this made me so nostalgic for the memories that could have been.
It's tricky. My editor, who I worked on the book with, also had never been to sleepaway camp, and lots of people who have read it, or lots of people in my life, my husband included, this was not a part of their childhood. And one thing I touch upon a little bit in the book, but also, and actually in an author's note after the book, is how inaccessible sleepaway camp is for so many people. It's very cost prohibitive. It's not something everybody has access to. And that's been in my mind a lot since I wrote the book. But I did want to capture the feeling of this kind of classic summer camp vibe where everybody can resort to who they were as a kid, tap into that, the good feelings of our younger selves, but through an adult lens, right? Through still having a somewhat reasonable bedtime.
Right. Exactly. Or even the fact of
gosh, I wish I could get together some adult friends and like just go camping or something. Cause this makes me want to go like make friendship bracelets and swim in a lake and do all the fun things.
Well, there is a lot to be said for that. Like, there's a lot to be said for one thing that Clara in the book is dealing with is burnout and anxiety, which are big parts of my own life and stuff that I have been working on. And one thing that I have realized is, what do I do in my own life as me, Kate, that is just for fun, like just for pleasure, not for work or to accomplish anything. And I think that is something she's really able to tap into in the book. Just this idea of doing things because they're pleasurable and enjoyable and they make you feel good. And that can be enough.
Yes, absolutely. And I love the reminder of that this book does give of like, what is your joy? Because sometimes you do, if you're just in the throes of life and then you stop and be like, oh, I actually have a minute. Like, what would be fun to do? And besides for me reading a book, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. What do we do just purely for fun? I think a lot of the way in which kind of like the social media economy has changed things is like there's a lot of ways to monetize parts of our lives or our hobbies, or there's the whole concept of the gig economy. And I had a similar realization recently where I was like, what are my hobbies? Even reading books now as an author, that's still connected to my job. So I had to really like take a moment and realize like I need to make more space if I can in my life for stuff that's just fun. And part of that requires me to like lighten up a little bit, not put a lot of pressure on myself for me to be good at stuff or for stuff to be have meaning other than just fun.
So then the camp piece, did you like pull on your own memories, or did you think like what would be really joyful things for them to do? And then that's what sort of sparked the competitions and the things that they did there.
Yeah, it's a combination of both. In a very earlier version of this book, I had the two main characters competing for ownership of the camp, which was such a fun idea, but I couldn't quite make it work. It never felt right. And especially required a lot of like investment in this idea of camp, which not everybody feels. So I did think about just like big moments from summer camp, like very pretty basic ones that we've all seen in movies, like capture the flag, a very big food fight, but turns them into tools for these characters to like interact, find conflict, experience the romance or the torment of the romance. And so that was really fun to like pit them all, not against each other, but in these like fun, ridiculous situations and just to see where they went.
And is that how the idea of the book just percolated? Because you're like, ooh, this could be a really cool hook, or was it something else?
No, since I think 2015, I have been working on a draft of a book set either at a summer camp or between people who are both camp counselors. I've always romanticized summer camp as a location, and I do think it can feed into a lot of these kind of classic summer romance stories. So I have been playing around with this idea for years. It really took shape over the last kind of 3 years as I really started to figure out these characters and the setting, and had written my first novel. And so that kind of helped me understand, I think, also what I love to write as a writer, which is I love writing different friend groups and focusing on that as a dynamic in a story. And I love the kind of rom-com aspect of contemporary romance. So that is how I got there. But this has been percolating for a decade, maybe even longer, maybe my whole life. My family's from New Hampshire. I love a good lake in the middle of nowhere. So I've always been drawn to writing about this world.
Oh, congratulations then. That must feel really good to finally see it. I mean, I love the cover too in the background. It's beautiful. And I could tell, I'm like, I bet Kate has been to Boston. I bet she's been to New Hampshire.
I'm from Boston.
Boston for over like 20 years. And I'm like, oh, I can picture the public gardens and the swan boats. And then I pictured Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire.
It's a good one. Yeah, I grew up mostly outside of Boston, and most of my family is now in New Hampshire, and that's where my mom grew up and my grandparents lived and where we spent a lot of time. And so it was very fun and meaningful for me to kind of capture these two locations that mean a lot to me. I also love Boston, even though Clara is escaping Boston. It's still a city I love to set people in. So that was really special. And New Hampshire's like a forgotten state a little bit. So I wanted to, give it its moment.
You gave them their little time to shine. Absolutely.
Yes, I love New Hampshire so much.
Well, as you said, like, I love that Clara, she's forced, right, to take this sabbatical, or her playcation, as she called it, because of this burnout, right? And Was that just a topic on your mind in general that you wanted to bring in because of your own life, as you said, or just turned out that way?
Gosh, it's so interesting because I recently just yesterday announced that I'm stepping down from the podcast that I've co-hosted for the last 6.5 years. And part of the reason behind that decision is that I have been in the last almost probably 2 years in the throes of some pretty extreme burnout, and it didn't even dawn on me. I was writing this book and writing this character, and I was basing it on other experiences with burnout in the past that I've had, and thinking like, oh God, that's a good thing I'm not dealing. Like I never put two and two. It felt removed, and now I'm looking back and I'm like, oh gosh, I was really writing from a very kind of raw and personal place of just like mental exhaustion, and I was really struggling, and I didn't realize it until very recently. So it's very personal for me. I'm a neurodivergent person. I have ADHD and I have an anxiety disorder and OCD. I've got all the things that I've been long figuring out how to juggle, and it just experiencing burnout really taps all those three things for me. And it's a really tough experience that I think we still don't talk about enough. I think a lot of times people feel almost embarrassed to be like ride from these things that we all do. It's my work, my job, it can almost feel like, well, it's not that hard. Why is this thing causing so much pain for you? But it really is something I think a lot of us experience. So yeah, it just came out. And the more I dug into the story and the character, it became more clear that was like what was at the core of what was going on for her.
Well, and I really appreciated that you kind of, in a very great way, not just like, here are the facts of burnout or here are the symptoms, but you lay them out. So I think a lot of readers are going to be like, oh, I identify with some of that stuff. So I appreciate that. It made me step back and be like, let me assess my own life here, because I'm sort of checking social boxes like Clara.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've all been through a really extremely traumatic experience living through a pandemic. And I think a lot of us are burnt out. And I think for folks who especially work in like pretty traditional corporate environments, there's so much burnout. And in the medical profession, teachers, like there are a lot of professions where I think the conversation is starting to happen. And I certainly didn't expect to like write a romance book that also was about burnout. But I do think that's, for me as an author and a person who loves the genre, the most special thing about romance is that if you are not a reader of it, you don't realize how deep these books are, and the things that they get at are so much more than happily ever after. But the happily ever after is like, that's what we're all after, that's why I'm there every time. But I also learn so much from so many of the books that I read, and I just think that's a really special part of romance.
And I think along with just this idea of burnout, I think too, from what I grabbed from the book, was that how we can just keep ourselves super busy because we don't want to deal with those hard things that are a thing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Or like the second you are quiet, you are alone in a quiet space, there's a lot of discomfort that comes along with that. Again, I'm speaking for myself, but the second our lives, the busyness is taken away, sometimes you're confronted with some really challenging things about yourself or about your life that can feel really uncomfortable to grapple with.
Although I liked her, I don't remember if it was Claire or a friend's tip about how to cure burnout. She said, cure burnout with boning. Pretty funny.
Well, yes, because this is a romance and we've got to have some sex in here. And quite honestly, I do think intimacy and sex is a very productive way to take care of yourself.
Yeah, release some of that good serotonin, right?
Right? Yes.
So do you have your own, vacation, planned or percolating then for you?
Interesting. Yes. I'm actually going to France for 2 weeks with one of my best friends from college. And this is a trip that came up extremely last minute. And I didn't want to let myself go for a lot of reasons, like work and my family and my kids. And is it selfish to go alone with a friend and not with my family? And should I be going to France before my book comes out and I have my podcast to be recording? I really gave myself a lot of reasons not to go. My husband was like, what are you talking about? You really should go. So going to France and for 2 weeks at the end of May with one of my freshman year college roommates and a dear friend.
Oh, have you been before, or is this like a new?
I have. I celebrated my 21st birthday in Paris, and that was the last time I've been to France. So I'm very excited. I've been meeting with an online French tutor once a year.
For you?
Yeah, I haven't done anything like this in a long time, and I'm really excited. really, really excited. And I am going to be writing while I'm there. I'm going to be working on my next book. So it is kind of a work vacation, but like, I mean, it's Paris. I don't like what,
And soak up all the
great. I
pre-Olympic
can't wait.
like festivities, right?
I know. I didn't even think about that part of things. So I was just, again, this was a very kind of spur of the moment, last minute. Like, I'm just going to say yes to this crazy thing. So
And those
I
are
did
the
not
best
even, I forgot
kind.
about the
That's great.
Olympics.
Yeah.
I hope so. I hope so.
Well, one other thing too, a theme in the book that I love besides the burnout was how she's sort of grappling with what confronting your life and how it looks, and is it different than what you thought it would be from your younger self, right? Do you think your younger self would have imagined like, oh, I'm this author, I'm a podcaster, or I don't know?
Yes. Yes. I have a very vivid memory, actually, of being at my friend's house in 8th grade and making a pact to never have a job where I had to wear a business suit. And there have been times where I have worn a business suit. So that didn't fully come to fruition. But I think I even understood at a younger age that I would follow a non-traditional professional path, which is like certainly what my career has been. It's been all over the place. And I have worked like every kind of job imaginable, from selling gourmet dog biscuits to working at like a phone call center to working retail for Patagonia to being an entertainment writer. Like, I've done many things, and it's been a very kind of arbitrary but also not journey. So I actually do think that my younger self would honestly be pretty psyched to know that we're writing books. I think she would be very proud.
Very good. Well, we've talked about some of like Claire's struggles, but what do you think readers are going to love most about her in general? Do you think?
I ended up she's very like, she's got kind of a goofy sense of humor. She has really tried to kind of to be a good friend and to rekindle friendships as she's trying to kind of, or spark a romance. And that, to me, I think friendships are such an important relationship that we're not really taught that we have to work at them the same way we have to work at romantic relationships. And she's really figuring out how to show up in an authentic way as a friend. And that really has ended up meaning a lot to me about this book. She's also very competitive. She loves to win. And like, she loves to really, really stick it to Mac. Her love interest. Like, they really just go at each other all the time. And I had so much fun. They're, constantly writing their kind of bickering / flirting. It's just a blast. And Clara ends up really kind of, I think, in the end, taking the risks that she would have been too afraid to take at the start of the story. And that's what I want for my fictional person who feels real in my head, but is not real.
I love that. And I loved her, and I loved Mac absolutely too. The guy who stayed at the camp and worked there and just seemed to have this total love for it. But I loved their verbal sparring. I'm like, gosh, it's their like foreplay for one another. It was like fantastic little banter. But what do you think readers are going to love most about him?
I mean, I find him very charming. He's kind of has a little bit of a Peter Pan, hasn't grown up yet vibe, but he's also like a really good guy at heart, and who's kind of figuring out his own insecurities and his own life path. And also, I tried to make him hot in that kind of mid-30s camp counselor sort of way. Like he is just ultimately like a really kind, fun person. And he also is competitive. I really loved this idea of kind of writing these two characters who could tap right back into their like competitive 14-year-old selves. That is really fun for me, because I do think we never really shake off who we are as kids, as teenagers. Those past people are all still part of us, and they all come out in different moments. And so I loved getting to kind of bring their past selves to life in how they act with each other now.
And he was kind of like that safe space for her to kind of finally let go and just be quirky even years later, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, he often doesn't wear a shirt, which I like. He does a lot in service of being a romance character.
And he's really good with the campers. I mean, not that you see it, but like just the moments that you did, I was just like, okay.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Yeah. I wanted to kind of make him just like a solid person who still knows how to get under her skin. Like, he's not perfect at all. He's flawed, but I kind of have this kind of like grown-up golden retriever in mind for him.
And did you have do you think about tropes when you write a book? Like, did you think, oh, this is going to be kind of a second chance romance sort of book, or did it just sort of work that way?
No, I never go into, I don't often go in thinking like, here are my 5 tropes in this book. I think I really think if you're writing romance in any form, if you're writing it for yourself, if you're writing fan fiction, if you're writing, traditionally published, but whatever you're writing, the tropes just come out of us. Like, right, they're a part of the genre. I think they're a part of writing as much as like character arc and plot. They're a vital part of the stories. So I never kind of pick and choose, although the next book I'm writing is enemies to lovers. And I did go into that being like, I want to write this enemies to lovers sports book. But no, it's funny. I didn't even really think about this being a second chance trope. Again, sometimes you're just like so clueless when you're in it. You're not like, I got a nice review that called it a second chance romance done right, I think was the quote. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a second chance romance. Yeah, look at that. But yes, sometimes I do, I think you start to identify the tropes as you draft too. Like you start to be like, oh, this is a grumpy sunshine. Oh, wouldn't it be fun if we like teased an only one bed here or an only one something?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so many fun ways that I think that you kind of start to see where you can play with those things, or where they're going to kind of come up organically.
Well, I loved your debut novel, In a New York Minute. I think I mentioned it in, I don't know what podcast episode, but on my favorite romance books with the best meet cutes, because I was like, oh my gosh,
really
this
nice
book, and they're reading on the subway. I'm like, it was perfect. And I love that you focused on New York in that book and in Boston in this one. So I'm like, oh, I wonder if she's going to do Los Angeles next, or maybe not Paris. I don't know.
Okay, no, great question. I did live in New York for 10 years, and New York is like my soul city. And so it was almost just like a cure for homesickness to get to write in the New York Minute. My next book I'm currently setting in kind of a Palm Springs-esque retirement world, which I love Palm Springs as a Los Angeles resident. And then another idea that is percolating is set in specifically LA and is kind of a Hollywood adjacent book. So I love writing about places that I know. It feels very cozy to me. I also feel like it allows me to be more authentic in the voice and the description, but I know that's not going to be, every book I write.
Yeah. Well, you started with a nonfiction book, and then and then you've also written, articles for lots of popular publications. So how has your writing journey evolved to kind of what it is today?
I think the kind of through line for everything I write is comedy, in that, I graduated college and moved to New York City and started taking classes in improv comedy and learning long form improv at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. And then I went on to become a teacher and a performer and a member of their touring company. And I think that really taught me the power of humor in storytelling, and also humor that's grounded in reality. And so when I wrote my memoir, The Dead Moms Club, which is about having a dead mom, and even the title is a little bit like, whoa, there's a lot of humor in the book. I think it's a really powerful device, not just for storytelling, but also for healing and finding connection. And so I think that is always kind of what comes out for me as a writer, is I think I do love finding funny moments in everything I write. I love reading super angsty books. I've never tried to write super angsty books, but I would love to try. But I love a dark, angsty romance. But for me, kind of the finding the funny moments in real things that happen to us is just always very appealing. And I think that connects everything I write, even though obviously a memoir about grief is very different from a romance contemporary fiction. But I think my voice is fairly consistent, actually, in everything I do.
So we're going to see more, hopefully, contemporary romance.
Yes. I have a book that I'm working on now that'll come out next year. It's not announced, so I don't know what I'm formally allowed to say about it.
But we've got one coming. So
we've got one coming, and this one is a little, I think the sex scenes are going to be bigger and more sexy, and it is playing with enemies to lovers, which I like. And weirdly, right now, it kind of has a little bit of a person dealing with grief. So yeah.
Well, and it sounds like,
stay tuned.
Hopefully writing that book is a little less traumatic than I think writing this one was, because I read the acknowledgments in all the books. I love that.
Me too. It's my favorite part of a book. Yeah, me too.
So in this one, I don't know if I can say or spoil it, but
oh yeah.
This was tell me what happened to your hand. What?
Oh my gosh, I broke my hand writing this book. Oh my gosh, yeah. I have a parenting group here in Los Angeles, and it's a very intense community. It's a small community, and every year there is a planned retreat in the mountains for a weekend, and where this is also you do camp stuff, but then it's also you're adults, so people are drinking and doing karaoke, that sort of thing. But we had a tug of war competition, and I wrapped the rope around both my hands, which is like the number one thing you're not supposed to do with a rope. And I truly, again, it's embarrassing that I did not realize that that was a disastrous thing to do. But in my brain, I was like, this will give me a good grip. And I'm super tall and I'm at the end of the line and I'll have this really tight grip on the rope because I've wrapped it around my hand like I do with my dog's leash, which is also a thing you're not supposed to do. And yeah, it backfired and it crushed the bones in my hand and it sprained my other hand. So it broke my right hand, which I'm left-handed. So that was very lucky. And it was a bad break. And I'm the kind of person who has spent their whole life having like silly injuries that are never serious.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of assumed that is what this was going to be. And when the doctor showed me the x-ray and they were like, this is bad. It's like, oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. So I had surgery pretty quickly and I had like 2 plates and 16 screws put in my hand.
Oh my gosh,
And
Kate.
oh no, it was a really crazy break. My hand is still not, I don't think it'll ever be fully normal. And then I had to do months of occupational therapy. And then I had to get a second surgery to get everything taken out because my hand didn't really regain full mobility and range of motion. And it's doing much better. But like, what an injury to like email your editor and your literary agent.
Yes.
Like what I broke the tool I use to do the work you hire me to do. Like it just was so silly and ridiculous. And luckily, like I'm healed and truly I thanked the team who helped me because they were all so great. They were so great. But yeah, it was so ridiculous. And I will say the nice thing is about breaking your hand, after you have surgery, they want you to use your hand very quick. Like they were like, yes, please type. Because I thought I was going to be out for months. But after about 2 weeks, I was allowed to start typing. Yeah, it was a relief. Yeah.
I mean, talk about stupid injuries. I like fell down the stairs and broke my big toe at one point. And I was like, okay, the big toe, like whatever. But oh my gosh, it was like weeks of wearing this boot. And then I feel like I had to train myself to walk again. I'm like, this is crazy. So I couldn't imagine when I read that, I'm like, a hand? I'm like, oh my gosh.
Oh, it was so, I'm getting over a sprained ankle that I sprained in August. And it was so bad. Like and I tripped over like nothing while I was camping. So I see you if you are a person who has done something similar.
I'm glad sounds like on the other side. So
yes.
Somebody gave you a really great medal, like for that, tug of war, even if it was just participation because you deserved it.
The community that I was a part of was so generous and like sent me a massive box of food, and someone drove me out 2 hours to the hospital. Like people were very helpful.
Good. Well, I want to talk about Kate the reader, but is there any last things that we need to know about One Last Summer before everyone goes and already one clicks it because they now just have to read it?
Oh gosh, I hope, as a writer, I really strive to create books that can be, I love a quick and easy devourable read. I want somebody to pick up my book and like have fun and feel relaxed and sucked in and enjoy the read. So I truly hope that is what this book gives people. That's what its role is in the world, is to be your fun read anytime. But it's nice it's coming out in summer with summer in the title, your fun summer read.
You heard it from her, folks. One Last Summer will be your fun summer read this year. It's on my list of must-read summer romance books for 2024, so you definitely want to add it to your TBR list. I had such a great time chatting with Kate about her book, but we continued our conversation where Kate shared why she loves reading romance, who some of her favorite romance book authors are, and what some of her favorite books are that she recommends to other readers. It was so much fun bonding over our love of romance books, and I want you to hear it. You can get access to this exclusive extended interview, which is available as a video to see both Kate and I within the She Reads Romance Books book club. When you join the club, you gain instant access to this exclusive video interview, as well as all of my extended interviews with romance authors who have joined me on the podcast. I love talking with authors about the genre, and I cannot wait for you to get to know them more personally when you join the club. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/book club to join today. And as another incentive to join the book club, this summer, you'll also gain access to my summer game, or summer reading challenge, which I've called Passport to Romance, of which Kate's new book, One Last Summer, is a part of, and One Destination on the Passport. When you join the club, you can download my passport, find the book titles that will sweep you across the U.S. and around the world this summer. And if you read just one book and turn in your passport, then you will be entered to win one of my A Year of Reading romance card decks. So definitely join the club and get reading this summer. It's going to be a lot of fun. And that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, happy reading, because life is better with a love story. That's all for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really helps me reach more romance book lovers like you, and I appreciate your support. If you're a book boyfriend collector like me, then you'll want to join my email list so you never miss a podcast episode or a new book list. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/join and sign up today. As a thank you, I'll instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends that will make you swoon. Trust me, you don't want to miss this list. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.